My mom has always had Elvis records, which I actually never listened to. She has stacks of them. She was a huge fan. Um, I just always remember them being there. But I don't remember him too well. I remember him more as a symbol, unfortunately, as kind of a joke, an impression. Honestly, my strongest image of Elvis wasn't even from the records. It was from where I live in Portland. There used to be an Elvis themed wedding chapel here. And every so often, this guy would come wandering outside dressed head to toe in a white jumpsuit. He had sideburns, dark glasses, the whole thing. He'd wave at traffic, talk to strangers, stand out in the sun. You could smell him before you saw him. That was Elvis to me, the impersonator, the jumpsuit, the stereotype. Then one day I actually listened to the records, and that complicated things because nobody really sounds like Elvis, even now. There are thousands of Elvis impersonators, and some really good ones actually, but there's very few Elvises. The voice, I think, moves around a lot. One moment it sounds like gospel, the next it sounds like country, and then suddenly there's a blues phrase in there. And the line lands somewhere you don't expect in his songs. So, I mean, it just feels less like somebody delivering a performance and more like somebody discovering the song while they're singing it. And that really made me curious because where does that come from? So, the deeper I dug, the stranger the story became. And this is stuff you probably know from the movie if you saw it. I haven't actually seen that. I'm looking forward to it. But Elvis grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, and later Memphis. The music around him was coming from all directions. He loved gospel groups like the Blackwood Brothers and Statesman's Quartet. He listened to blues musicians like Arthur Crudup, whose song That's All Right would eventually become his first breakthrough record. He listened to country singers like Roy Acuff and Hank Snow, church music, radio music, local musicians, pretty much whatever caught his attention. And what surprised me is how many people describe the same thing. Not Elvis performing, but Elvis watching. Friends talked about him studying performers, watching preachers, watching singers, watching audiences, watching movies, watching how people moved, watching how they talked. Then pieces of those things would start showing up later in a gesture, in a rhythm, just a phrase, a way of holding himself on stage, and not copied exactly, but absorbed, transformed, and then recombined. So the image most people remember is incredibly specific. They remember the hair, the voice, the jumpsuit, the icon. But the young Elvis sounds almost impossible to pin down. Which brings me to Sun Records. So before Elvis became Elvis, he walked into a tiny recording studio in Memphis run by Sam Phillips. So Sun wasn't a major label. It was a small operation that had already recorded blues musicians like Howlin' Wolf and B.B. King. Phillips had spent years listening to musicians who didn't fit neatly into the mainstream music industry. Then this kind of awkward truck driver showed up, and for a while nobody quite knew what to do with him. He wasn't entirely country, he wasn't entirely blues, he wasn't entirely pop. The categories didn't fit him. Then one night, while fooling around with Arthur Crudup, with the song That's All Right, something suddenly clicked. Not because Elvis had finally found his category, maybe because nobody could quite figure out what category he belonged in. And that's the detail that keeps pulling me back. Because later, Elvis became one of the most recognizable categories in American culture. You could recognize him from a silhouette. You, but at the beginning, he wasn't a category at all. He was difficult to categorize. And I keep wondering if those two things are connected. What happens when somebody whose gift is absorbing influences from everywhere suddenly becomes a symbol himself? What happens when the observer becomes the thing everyone else is watching?